Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, January 31st. You are in the Finance Committee. Thank you all for being with us. The order of the bills today will be as follows. Senate Bill 219, Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program, Senate Bill 41, and then Senate Bill 24, Senate Bill 70, Senate Bill 172, Senate Bill 144, Senate Bill 366, Senate Bill 178, and Senate Bill 142. So that's 9 bills for today. I'm going to ask that the sponsor can take as much time as they need to explain the bill, and all the witnesses, you'll have 2 minutes. When the timer goes off, you can finish your sentence. Please don't finish your paragraph, don't finish your page, just finish your sentence. We would appreciate it. It'll be a long day today. So thank you all for being here, and we will start with the Senate Bill 219. And do we have someone here from the administration? This is an administration bill. Is anybody here for Senate Bill 219, Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program? Is this Ryan Moran? No.
No.
There he is. Mr. Moran, it's so nice to meet you. Your name comes up almost every day. You have got to be one of the busiest people in the firm.
Well, I was I was throwing away my coffee. So,
so
it's good to see you, Chair
good
Beidel.
to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Klossmeyer, members of the committee. I am pleased to be here with my colleague, Sean Stafford, who is the Director of Maryland Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program. For the record, my name is Ryan Moran, and I'm the Deputy Secretary of Healthcare Financing and the state's Medicaid Director. We are here to urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 219, the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program. This bill would extend the sunset date of the program from December the 31st, 2024 to December 31st of 2030. This would allow the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program to continue to assist low and moderate income Medicare beneficiaries with Medicare Part D costs. As you may know, the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program serves as one of the most important safeguards for seniors in the state of Maryland to afford their prescription drugs. In 2022, the program served more than 25,000 seniors across the state of Maryland. The program provides subsidies to help Medicare beneficiaries with low and moderate income pay for their Medicare Part D prescription drug premiums. And CareFirst is required to fund the program in order to earn its premium tax exemption as a nonprofit health service plan. Seniors eligible for the program are provided a premium subsidy. This year, that subsidy is up to $75 per month towards their Medicare Part D premiums. And it is estimated that about 87% of enrollees, the benefit covers 100% of their total monthly Medicare Part D premium costs during the calendar year of 2024 that we're entering. Membership distribution is across 16 Medicare Part D organizations, offering 55 Medicare Part D prescription drug plans. The highest concentration of members in this particular program are individuals in Baltimore County, with the second highest jurisdiction in Baltimore City. This program continues to coordinate with cross-agency collaboration with the Department of Aging to provide state health insurance plan coordinators and volunteer counselors with information regarding the program. And we maintain a call center and a website to answer member and prospective members' questions throughout the year. With that, Chair Beidel, Sean and I are available to answer any questions that you and members of the committee may have. And we thank you in advance for your favorable report on this bill and for your work on a daily basis here in Annapolis to advocate on behalf of seniors.
Thank you. Mr. Stafford, do you want to add anything, or are you just here for information?
Well, I'm just here to provide any information.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Do I have any questions from the committee? Senator Klossmeyer?
Yeah, I just wanted, Ryan, when you said they get, seniors get $75 a month, what is the threshold for that?
They can get a maximum of $75 per month is the benefit. So if their Medicare Part D premium costs are $68 per month, we would pay the entire $68. If they were $78 per month, we'd pay $75 towards that, and then they would have to be liable for the remaining $3.
Okay,
However, as Mr. Moran had stated, with the benefit that we've increased to $75 for 2024, we're projecting that 87% of the enrollees would have 100% of their premium subsidy cost provided by the subsidy which the state provides.
okay. But I mean, is there an income threshold?
Yes, they're as
What-
part of the eligibility factors. To be eligible, one of the eligibility factors is that you must, well, the eligibility factors are you must be a Maryland resident. You must, your income must be 300% of FPL or federal poverty level or below. And also you cannot be dual eligible in Medicare, Medicaid, or receiving 100% of the federal low income subsidy or extra help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm going to take that a little further. About how much is 300% of the federal poverty level at this point? Just estimate.
I'd have to look, but it's for a single person, and we do it by household income. So a household of one person, it's approximately $42,000, and for two people, I believe it's somewhere around $60,000.
Thank you. It's a great program, and thank you for managing it.
Nope.
Any other questions for this panel on this bill? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 219. Isn't that who that is? You're Mr. Stafford, right?
Yes, I am.
It threw us because it says James and you called him Sean.
Yes.
So,
You
got it.
you can blame my parents for that. I was born James Sean Stafford, christened Sean James Stafford.
Sean fits you very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy. Senate Bill 41 is next on the agenda. If Senator Lamb is here. And Senator Lamb, would you like to bring up your panel of Karen Morgan, Fran Schneiderman, and Marceline White?
Sure. Yeah. Marceline White, actually Fran Schneiderman and Megan Kelly from New York. Great. Either way is fine.
I'll go here.
Begin. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Vital, for allowing us to testify in support of SB 41. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12. This legislation aims to update the Maryland Consumer Credit Reporting Act to align with the requirements of federal law. This is a step that all but 5 states have already taken. The Federal Credit Reporting Act is a federal law that was enacted back in 1970 that, among other protections, it limits the length of time certain old information can stay on a credit report. Since 1996, the federal reporting limits do not apply if the report is being used for credit transactions or life insurance plans of $150,000 or greater, or for employing an individual at a salary of $75,000 or more. The Maryland Consumer Credit Reporting Act was passed 6 years later in 1976 and has not been updated following the federal update that occurred back in 1996. This is why the current Maryland law has reporting thresholds that are actually much lower than that exists in federal law. By passing this bill, we are not changing what is allowed to be in a credit report, but we will be creating consistency and ensuring that our constituents can go to either the Federal Trade Commission at the federal level or the Maryland Department of Labor to address any potential violations. Under current law, some complaints are solely federal, whereas others can only be filed by within the state. This can lead to confusion for our constituents and concerns about not having their rights protected depending on where their level falls and where they file their concerns. It's important to emphasize that with this bill and with the current law, only governs the action of credit reporting agencies. It is not putting any new requirements on our Maryland businesses or on small businesses. Maryland businesses will still be able to request credit reports just as they always have, and compliance will be the responsibility of the large credit reporting companies. One question that we have recently received was about whether this bill would limit a Maryland business's ability to do a criminal background check. That is not impacted by this bill. Criminal background checks are not impacted by this bill. Businesses can continue to require criminal background checks for their employees. This bill would only impact whether certain criminal background information could be added to a credit report. So with that, that's the bill. Thank you, and happy to take any questions after the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Senator. So who's next? Thank you, Marcy.
Good afternoon, Chair Bidel, members of the committee. My name is Marceline White. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Action Maryland, formerly the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition. Economic Action fights for economic rights and equity, as well as housing justice through education, advocacy, and direct service. And I'm here today in strong support of SB 41. I want to thank Senator Lamb for bringing this legislation. This is a simple bill. It simply harmonizes Maryland's Consumer Credit Reporting Act with the federal law and updates it after more than decades of timelines where we haven't really updated that law. As you all know and have heard many times in this chamber, credit is critical to most facets of consumers' life. Consumer credit and credit reports affect access to loans, mortgages, tenancy, auto, and more. What this does is consumer credit reports can include old information when a report is used in connection with credit transactions. And this updates the amounts that that people can use to really reflect financial thresholds. And the last time they were updated was in 1996 at the federal level. And this brings Maryland up to conform to the federal standards. It provides clarity and harmony between federal and state law and reflects more current economic conditions. So we think this is a simple and clear rule. And for all these reasons, we support this legislation and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Bidel, members of the committee for the opportunity to address the bill. I'm Franz Schneiderman. I work with a group called Consumer Auto that works to protect Maryland consumers and Maryland drivers. We strongly support the bill because it updates Maryland's credit reporting standards to match those in federal law. And in so doing, it extends some additional protection under Maryland law to Marylanders who are applying for jobs, who are looking for credit, for mortgages and life insurance decisions. I mean, the general principle of the Federal Credit Reporting Act is that you don't allow the reporting of information that's bad information about consumers that is more than 7 years old. And that's a good principle because it gives consumers who've had trouble in the past but have done better in the last 7 years a fresh start, a chance, to rebuild their credit and the privileges that come with it. Also, older credit information very often is simply inaccurate. I mean, a lot of credit information in general is inaccurate. But when you're dealing with information that's more than 7 years old, it's even more likely to be inaccurate. Now, the federal standards were modified in 1996 to raise the thresholds on life insurance and mortgage borrowing. And most importantly, I think job applicants to a more modern figures. The Maryland standards date from the mid-70s, but even the federal standards we're updating here to meet here are 30 years old. Particularly, you can see this in the case of job applications. Under Maryland law now, any job that pays over $20,000 is exempted from the prohibition against using old credit information. Obviously, there aren't a whole lot of jobs with salaries under 20K at this point. This bill would update that to 75K, which would cover a lot of middle-income job applicants and gives them some additional protection. So support the bill. Hope you'll give it a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. And Ms. Morgan?
Good afternoon, Chairman Bidel, members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Karen Morgan. I'm a member of the Executive Council for AARP Maryland, and we are here in support of Senate Bill 41. We thank Senator Lamb for this legislation. AARP Maryland represents 850,000 people. We are advocates for those who are 50 and older. And I don't know, adulting is hard and it gets really hard after you reach the age of 50. It just seems to get harder and harder. And people can run into major obstacles. What if you have a loved one who has to undergo long-term care? Maybe your finances are affected by that. Maybe you've had to declare bankruptcy. And maybe that was 10 or 15 years ago, but now you've moved past that, or you think you have, only to find out that the employer who you're trying to get a job with can get records of that bankruptcy, even though you've worked incredibly hard to remove any vestige of that hardship from your life. It's not fair. We talk about expungement for people who commit crimes. Well, what about if you've run into obstacles and you've overcome them? You should be able to move past that, especially if you want a job that only pays, I don't know, $25,000, which is barely a living wage in Maryland, or if you want an insurance policy that's only $50,000, or you want to engage in credit that may have an impact of $150,000. That's barely a house in Maryland these days. So people should be able to move past these obstacles that shouldn't appear on their credit reports. And that's why this bill, which aligns Maryland law with federal law, is welcome. And it's definitely past time for passage of Senate Bill 41. So we hope that you will give it a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Do we have any questions for this panel? No questions? That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 41. Thank you. And next we have Senator Kagan is here for Senate Bill 24. And Senator Kagan, would you like to bring up your panel?
Sure.
Can you introduce your panel for me, please?
Happy to. With me is Franz Schneiderman, Lisa Braylove, I had that a second ago, from the Attorney General's office, and Eric Friedman from the Montgomery County Office of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you, Senator. You can go.
Thank you. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. And this is my first visit to the Finance Committee this session. So I really want to start by congratulating you, Madam Chair, and really excited for the opportunity to continue to work together with you in an elevated role, and Madam Vice Chair, of course. This is a very simple, modest, clarifying consumer protection bill. If you go to a store and you decide you want to buy a sweater, you take it home, you're really excited, you think it's going to work, you take it home, and it turns out it doesn't fit. You only discover then that the receipt says no returns. So you're kind of stuck with a sweater that doesn't fit. Current Maryland law offers retailers 3 options for announcing and displaying their return policies. They can either display it visibly on a sign somewhere in the location, usually on the wall or by the cash register. Option 2 is you can put it on the merchandise, on the price tag or wherever. And option 3 is on the receipt. By the time you get the receipt, if it says no returns, you're stuck. And so we believe that Maryland should comply and follow the lead of 13 other states that just have made it clear that consumers should be aware of the retailer's policy before they make a purchase. So the phrase caveat emptor, or buyer beware, I don't quite know how a buyer can be aware or beware if they can't get the information until after they have become a buyer. So a few things. This also would address online purchases before you click the final checkout, as even Utah did, that they would have to acknowledge the return policy. And the Office of Consumer Protection in Montgomery County has asked me to do this. They have gotten a lot of complaints over the years, and the Attorney General is here again this year. They have gotten almost 2,800 complaints about return policies in the last few years. And this is a really easy fix. Virginia, our next door neighbor, even their state requires that their policies must be on a sign attached to the goods or placed in a conspicuous public area. So, and just to be clear, if anybody worries that this is going to be too big a burden on our small businesses, if you take one piece of paper, if you have a magic marker and a piece of tape and you put it up by the cash register, you would be in compliance with this bill. This is really simple, and it's just so consumers don't get ripped off and learn about a return policy of no returns after it's too late to do anything about it. So really simple. I defer to my colleagues and happy to take questions either now or after them. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll do that at the end.
Yes,
Senator.
perfect.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Elisa Bray-Love-Share. I'm the Deputy Director of the Mediation Unit in the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 24, the Right to Refund Information Act. This bill does a few important things. It updates the existing refund rule to add protections for online shopping. It ensures policies are applied equally to everyone. And most importantly, it gets consumers the information they need before making a purchase. So let's start there. Consumers have a right to know the store's refund policy before they buy something. It's not enough to just put it on the back of a receipt where the consumer doesn't see it until it's too late. We've heard stories where consumers haven't even left the store, yet they're refused a refund. Refund policies are also getting more complicated. While some stores may say they have a no-hassle refund policy, many still put limitations and conditions on their refunds. Stores now want to scan your driver's license. They log your refund history, and if you return things too often, they may refuse you a refund. Consumers have a right to know that. Maryland's refund rule goes back almost 50 years and certainly didn't contemplate online shopping. Lots of consumers are just comfortable enough to make a purchase online, but they don't know how to locate a retailer's refund policy on a website. Sometimes the policy is in the terms and conditions, sometimes it's not there at all. Requiring online retailers to put the policy in a place that the consumer must view before checking out means online retailers have to be as transparent as their counterparts with the physical location. Finally, this bill will ensure that refund policies are applied equally to everyone. We get complaints from people who say they're told no refunds, though they just saw someone else get a refund in the same situation. If a store has a policy saying no refunds and a sign up, it's much easier to know if that policy is being applied fairly to everyone. For these reasons, the Consumer Protection Division requests that the committee return a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Beidle, members of the committee. I'm Franz Schneiderman, Consumer Auto. As Senator Kagan said, I think this is a fairly simple bill that affords some additional protections to consumers, giving them access to the information they need when they need it, which is before they make the purchase rather than after they make a purchase. Merchants are generally expected to post their refund and exchange policies under current law and offer exchanges. This just adds the stipulation that it be done either prominently at the point of sale or on a landing page people will see before they make the purchase for an online purchase, so we can be reasonably confident that people will see the information before they make the purchase rather than after they've already committed to it. So, it's a small but helpful added protection for Maryland consumers, and I hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidle and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Eric Friedman. I am the director of the Montgomery County Government Office of Consumer Protection. Our office was established 52 years ago, and I've only been working there for the past 4 decades. I'm a member of the Maryland and DC Bar and have been appointed by 3 governors in Maryland to serve on the Collection Agency Licensing Board. Full disclosure is an important underpinning of consumer protection and integrity in the marketplace. The current regulation about refund policies was enacted in 1976. and provides that a merchant must disclose its refund policy in one of three ways: on a clearly visible sign, on a label attached to the item being purchased, or on the sales receipt itself. Unfortunately, when the disclosure is only on the receipt, the consumer receives notice after the purchase is made. The intent of the current regulation is admirable and necessary. It is essential for consumers and merchants to know and agree upon the terms of a refund or exchange policy before the transaction is consummated. When a merchant's refund and exchange policy is only provided to the consumer after the consumer's made payment, the consumer does not have full disclosure of the merchant's refund and exchange policies prior to the purchase. This bill provides that disclosure of refund and exchange policies must be provided before the consumer pays for the merchandise and cannot only be disclosed on a merchant's receipt. The bill would also update the code to address online retail sales. From our perspective, the bill may be as close to a common sense bill as elected officials may ever see. Our office frequently receives complaints regarding refund and exchange policies. We respectfully request that the Finance Committee give this bill favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you to this panel. Do I have any questions from any committee members? I don't see any questions. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 24. Thank you, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have an unfavorable. I'm sorry. No, you're finished. I'm sorry. I missed the one unfavorable. Kaylee. Thank you. I think this is your first time in front of the committee this year.
It
Nice to see
is,
you.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair. It's great to see you. Honorable members of the committee, for the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance here in opposition to the bill. I do want to start by saying that most retailers offer flexible return policies for customers. That's because we want them to be happy. We want them to come back to our stores. Most retailers offer returns in a window of a 7 to 90-day period of time. Around the holidays, that's typically far more generous. They require typically tags and receipts for a full refund. But even then, those stores will allow credit if an item has not been used or is involved in theft. And that's $100 billion problem in the United States, hence looking at people's driver's license now. And again, most retailers mark items typically for final sale or as is to indicate to consumers that they cannot return those items. Many of our retailers already have signs posted in stores or on the receipt, but I do want to add consumers very easily can Google a return policy, and that is on 99% of websites that's out there. Regarding this bill, though, mandating signs at every point of sale location is sign overload. The area is busy. It's already full of displays of information for you, what cards you can use when you pay, bag policies, age verification for items, depending on the county, pesticides, tobacco, things like that. And I also think from an environmental perspective, it doesn't really make sense to attach yet another tag with a return policy, which quite frankly can't even fit on a lot of smaller items like a lipstick or lip liner, a piece of jewelry or something like that. Return policies can be lengthy. There's a lot of different ways to pay now, ways that people order items, things like that. So that's why in these two locations, it doesn't always make the most sense. The Maryland law that's on the books works. It provides flexibility for retailers about displaying our policies. We don't think this law is necessary. Thank you.
Kelly, do I have any questions for this witness? My apologies again for almost missing you, Kelly. Thank you. Thanks for being here. That does end the hearing for Senate Bill 24, and now we have Senate Bill 70, and I see Senator McCray is here. Senator McCray, do you have, you don't have a panel?
I don't think so. I think Gabe may be coming virtual, but
Yes.
it's self-explanatory.
Okay, thank you.
First, Madam Chair, just let me say that I'm honored, privileged to be able to sit here in front of you at this moment, in this posture. And always good to see you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Madam Chair, if I can just take a proud privilege and honor to be able to say that I'm joined by my intern, Hakeem Hicks, but I'm also joined by one of our pages, Ariana Stevens. And I say, Senator Hayes, you'd be great to know, and I would correct it. I don't call it Poly, but it's the Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. She is a 12th grader there, but one of the unique things is, Madam Chair, she got a 5.0. It's like some things you don't know is possible, but like a 5.0. So I'm just thoroughly impressed, and I'm thoroughly glad that she
Senator,
could be
we
able to-
cannot see them. Can they either stand or? Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But Madam Chair, I'm here in reference to Senate Bill 70, and Senate Bill 70 has kind of already been worked out with the agency, which is why you don't see a number of folks sitting with me and to be able to preserve your time. I do want to walk into how we got there to Senate Bill 70 and why this is important. Madam Chair, with the budget situation in the state of Maryland, there have been a number of different variations of how we look at cuts. And unfortunately with MTA, every year they take a look at our bus lines and see if they're going to change different routes or things of that nature. I'd gotten a plan that routes that they were going to change. They talked about one up and down North Avenue. They talked about what we called the 15 back in the day, but it's the Brown now. And when I got them, I did what I was supposed to do as a legislator. I joined my team. We wrote out de facto letter and said, hey, this is why these cuts aren't good. The one up and down North Avenue, they took away. They said that they were going to look at that. But the one with the 15, they continued to do it. And it caught me off guard a little bit because I was like, nobody would make that decision. This bus has been here historically. It takes folks to their job. So for folks that know Bel Air Road, it stops at Gardenville, it stops at Overley, and then it hits White Marsh Mall. So the only people that's catching this bus is the folks that's trying to get to that job hub, White Marsh Mall. On Bel Air Road, there are two anchor stores right there off of the Beltway. That's also where people, I just thought about it, they're in the 8th district. So they're trying to get to those two Beltways. So these are folks that are in working class neighborhoods. They're in Frankfurt, they're in Bel Edison, they're in the 4x4, they're in Sedonia. That route has always historically been there. I asked the MTA, because I think it's important to go through the chain of command. I talked with the MTA to understand how did you all come to the conclusion of making a decision such as this? And I asked them, because we're in 2023 at the moment, help me understand the data that you put forward to say that this route is no longer necessary to go this direction. And they couldn't come back with any of those types of things. They're short on staff, we're short on money, and we're making decisions that impact people. And what happens is having a negative impact. What they did was they took another route off of Northern Parkway and they moved that one to White Marsh Mall. What that does is it now adds a transfer for all those people that were going straight to their job hub. Now they got to catch another bus to get there. All this bill is asking is whenever you're putting forward a suggestive route to change, that you put data up on your website prior to making that decision. The folks that are with disabilities, so our paratransit folks, our workers, everybody needs to understand, why do we do this? Unfortunately, in neighborhoods that have a number of social ills, they're not even going to understand the impact until their bus route don't come no more. So they're not thinking about all that pre-work that took place or all these different things, especially if it isn't a lot. They're going to come one day, try to catch their bus. It's not going to be there. And the folks don't know who an administrator or a secretary is. They know who their legislators are. And then they're going to come knocking at our door. This is why the MTA has said, hey, we did something similar. This just complements the work that Delegate Roof and Delegate Senator Carter had did in the previous year. And just make sure that that information is accessible to all to be able to make the case to the MTA why this wouldn't be warranted.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have anyone virtually? I think we have. If you can wait, we'll have questions at the end of the testimony. So, Gabriel Rubenstein, would you like to testify?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Beidel and committee members for the opportunity to provide testimony today. And thank you, Senator McCray, for recognizing the importance of paratransit to thousands of Marylanders with disabilities through your sponsorship of this bill. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of the bill with sponsor amendment. My name is Gabriel Rubenstein, and I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Maryland, the protection and advocacy organization for Maryland. DRM's mission is to advocate for the legal rights of people with disabilities throughout the state. One of the mandated purposes of DRM's legal work is to ensure that people with disabilities are included in their communities. Community integration requires public transportation systems that are equally reliable, effective, and accessible to people with disabilities. SB 70 increases the transparency of agency decisions, facilitates engagement and oversight from the community, and allows Marylanders with disabilities who travel by bus or paratransit to make better informed decisions pertaining to travel and life plans. All Marylanders should be able to rely on travel plans to facilitate their various life activities. When transit agencies change these routes or reduce service unexpectedly, the results can be extremely chaotic for riders and cause serious disruptions to riders' day-to-day activities. Those with disabilities are no exception, as many people with disabilities rely on bus and paratransit to travel to critical events like work, school, and medical appointments. Of course, it's important that our transit agencies have the ability to adapt to demand to allow systems to function optimally, but there must be a clear process and means of notice and engagement for those impacted. SB 70 provides such a process. The understanding that alteration to bus routes directly impact paratransit riders is paramount, and SB 70 addresses this linkage by ensuring that the measured impact on bus routes will be applied to paratransit and that the community will be informed. For these reasons, DRM strongly supports Senate Bill 70 with the sponsors amendment and urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. I actually have a question for the senator
Yes,
and
ma'am.
the favorable for Gabe. You're putting it on the website, but if a rider doesn't know to look at the website, how will they find it? Should maybe there be a little signage on the bus, this route will change?
That's not a bad idea. You're right, because they are impacted from that piece of it. And I think that MTA understands the importance now of like, how do we proactively engage in, like, if they have the metrics to say, hey, only 3 people are catching this bus at this moment, it's just not warranted, it's spending more money, then the riders need to be able to understand it, and we can make that decision, and that would be a good decision. But if you're telling me that 5 riders are catching it and you're going to add 5 riders with your new route, like, I don't know whether they would. So I would definitely say yes, ma'am, that if a change will happen somewhere on that bus stop would be a great idea.
So that would be a favorable
compliment.
amendment.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hey, can I lean in on MTA did say that it was in the wrong section, so they would like it to go in a certain section. I just wanted to make sure that
Okay,
you all knew that.
we'll do that.
Yes,
And,
ma'am.
we have a question from Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And along the same lines, I was going to ask, so for the people who are using that bus route, what kind of notice did they have that their route was going to change?
I tell you, I didn't like, so there's preliminary discussions that take place. So they let you know, hey, these are the routes that's impacted. And immediately you have to let them know. That's why we did a delegation letter. I think that the 40th also did one on the North Avenue route change. And then it comes out and say, hey, this decision is there. Mine's is, I just like data. I think that in the moment that we're in, we just want to understand, like, why are you making these decisions? And I get that money is shrinking. I also get that staff has challenges, but like, if that is the reason why you're cutting a route, you have to say that versus that people aren't riding this bus.
Right. Because I'm not familiar with those rules, because we don't have a lot of transit in our district, rural on the Eastern Shore. But it's interesting listening to what you've experienced. Kind of how does MTA handle that? What is the process they're supposed to go through? I can do a little bit of homework.
September, October, they let us know the route changes. It gives us about a 45 day window to kind of take public comments and things of that nature, and then the decisions are made.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Senator Hershey, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think he might have just answered it, but thank you, Madam Chair. Just, I wanted to make sure, and maybe it's because it's in a different part that you had mentioned, but specifically your bill is saying that before announcing the service reduction or cancellation, this report must be created. That's what that's the meat of what your bill is, to create this report.
Yes, sir.
And then the 30-day the public hearing is already in law, that public hearing.
So they do that, take public comment.
And you
Yes,
just
sir.
want to make sure that the report is issued 30 days before that public hearing, so everybody is aware.
Yeah, I don't even know how they can make a public comment except for this route is important to me, but
Right.
like there are a number of folks, organizations that'll come in and say, this ain't warranted with the information that with no information, how can you make a real strong public comment?
Right. Okay, understand it better now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Vice Chair Klossmeyer.
Yeah, just to follow up with the chair's suggestion to put a sign on the bus, my question is, you know, the buses might change. I mean, this bus number 15 of which
Mhm.
you were talking
Mhm.
about might not be the same bus physically.
Yep.
By the time it goes back and gets cleaned up and everything, you might have a different bus, so that might.
Some of them, they got
Rob.
bus signs though. The sign don't change though, but the buses do change. You're right.
Yeah, so that might, so I don't know.
We'll work that out. Do I have any other, oh, Senator Ellis?
Thank you. Madam
I didn't
Chair.
think I would get that many questions for this bill.
It's a great. Yeah, so you said I shouldn't ask this question?
Oh, no, please.
Okay. Just be sure. But yeah, I'm sorry I missed the first part of your testimony. So forgive me if this is redundant, Senator McCray. So now what happens if a route or service needs to be contracted or canceled? They get no notice, or people get no notice, or?
So when changes happen, there is notification. That's how what triggered our delegation letter. They also are taking public comment, and then they change the route, like a decision is made. We don't want to stop the decision, but we do say, like, if you're going to make these decisions, you need to do it in a very transparent way, the way constituents understand why you're taking that route.
So now it's not transparent, you're saying, as far as?
Data's from a ridership standpoint, how many disabilities folks would this impact? What's the workforce standpoint? How would this impact them? That information isn't as transparent as it should be.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Because it's very important, I deal with issues like that on a different topic where things are summarily closed, public facilities closed, and no one knows, and or not sufficient notice, and so yeah, this is a good bill. So thank you.
I appreciate you, and just want to recognize again, the MTA was supportive of it too. So outside of the section change.
Thank you, Senator. We have one last witness that is favorable with amendment, and that's Mr. Vince McAvoy.
Thank you so much, Chair, and congratulations on your seat. I want to thank Senator for bringing this bill. I do believe that we will get to some answers of this, although a lot of the questions that you're asking, and we'll say MTA does provide these. There are pamphlets and pieces of paper that they routinely put on buses when there are changes. There are placards that they put when they're not hawking something or putting some bizarre public service announcement on the upper hand portion of the deck of the bus that lists all those changes. And sometimes these changes are dozens of routes. So I do want to give credit to them. And I want to say that for decades, Maryland and Baltimore specifically has been blessed with a very, very good MTA service. Since COVID, when let's go back to having lack of any data, to Senator McCray's point, they were saying that buses should be shut down amidst the pandemic when basically all the businesses were closing. Things have been kind of messed up since that point. They had first tried to shut down practically every bus line in the MTA service area along that time. There was a lot of vocal opposition. Some of that opposition continues to this day. The things that they review down at St. Paul and the surveys that they do and the people that they put on the buses don't adequately get to the amendment that I'm wanting to have introduced. And I hope it's considered, because what we're having going on now is dispatchers are randomly shutting down routes hours at a time with no notice and no transparency on the website, even though they're telling us when routes are shut down for criminal activity and so forth, saying 71's down because of police activity. They're shutting down routes hours at a time And it's a completely totalitarian call that they're making on this. And I think that should be introduced into this report because dispatchers don't have that type of power and shouldn't. Thank you, committee, for hearing my points.
Thank
I'm
you.
available for questions.
Do I have any questions for Mr. McAvoy for his testimony? None at this time. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you there.
Thank you. Good to see you. So that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 70, and next we have Senator Bailey for Senate Bill 172. Senator Bailey, do you have anyone for your panel?
No.
Try to do this as quick and efficiently as possible, the way we like to do things right across the hall. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senator Bailey, representing District 29 from St. Mary's and Calvert County. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Senate Bill 172, which would protect consumers by prohibiting an insurance company from increasing a premium based on a claims history of an insured individual where 2 or fewer of the claims within the prior 3 years resulted from collisions with free roaming animals, specifically in our state, deer, bears, for which the insurer was not at fault for the loss. I'm introducing this legislation based on my own personal experience when I was involved in a collision with a deer, where I was sitting stationary on the highway, stopped, and a deer ran out of a field and ran right into the side of my new truck. My insurance company determined I was not at fault in the accident. However, this incident was later combined. A couple years earlier, I'd had a small fender bender in a parking lot, and this deer increased my premium by 26%. My insurance was not increased due to the fender bender that I had. And when I inquired with my agent about the reason for the increase, I was informed that the deer collision caused the premium increase, even though it was determined not to be my fault at the accident. And as I said, I was actually sitting stationary in the road. So when I decided to appeal and dispute the increase, I was effectively told that the insurance company was not increasing my premium because it made sense. They informed me it was because they could. And I said, wow, that's not the way we should do business, in my opinion, for my constituents. So as a result of that, meeting with the Insurance Commission, I have had many communications, and I just wanted to talk to you about some of the communications I've had about this bill, especially from some insurance agents. Biggest question, did you have comprehensive insurance? Your premium actually wasn't increased. You just lost the good driving discounts that you had. Well, I'd like to address just a couple of those, right? As I tried to tell you, this was a brand new truck, okay? So Maryland law is pretty specific about that. If you have a new truck, and I didn't have the money to buy it outright, so I definitely had a loan on it. So you know what's required in Maryland? You've got to have comprehensive insurance. You've got to have liability insurance. You've got to have collision insurance. So yes, I had all the insurance that I was required. And now the way that it works, and it has for years, when you get your insurance bill, if anybody's curious, just take a look at it. You'll see that it's not divided up. You get one insurance bill, right? All those are rolled into one bill. And when I got my insurance notice, just so I wasn't confused that this wasn't a premium, I wanted to go ahead and read it. I'd be more than happy to share a copy of it with you. It says, "Dear Maryland policyholder, the percentage of increase in your policy premium subject to this notice, 26%. The dollar amount of increase in policy premium subject to this notice, $742 a year." So I just wanted to clear up some of the points about this. So this Senate Bill 172 will update Maryland's law to ensure that consumers are protected from the risk of premium increases resulting from a deer strike. Since the last major revision of the state's insurance law dealing with this, approximately 50 years ago, the number of cars on Maryland roads have significantly increased. Not to mention the number of deer and deer strikes on Maryland roads. I mean, many of us remember the traffic and what it used to be 50 years ago. And now you know what it is. And by the way, if we went back to deer populations 50 years ago, I can remember as a child sitting in a deer stand on the chance that we might see one deer. And quite frankly, in many areas of our state, deer are considered vermin at this point by a lot of people. And I think that, I don't want to have a hearing about the Department of Natural Resources and their inability to manage a state deer herd. But I would say this, that it should not, what their mismanagement or potential mismanagement should not create a premium increase for Maryland residents. And the fact is, this doesn't affect us just when we're in rural areas. It affects us all over. Now, State Farm just put out a number of crashes with deer in our state. And the Department of Natural Resources just published it, right? This affects between 30 and 35,000 crashes a year just in the state of Maryland. This is what we're talking about, 35,000 of these, and all of a sudden, because they can, and that's why we didn't change or a big change in the insurance law with this. We worked with staff and committee to try to come up with an addition to say, wait a minute, a non-fault accident with a deer, your insurance should not be raised. Because I don't believe that Marylanders should be required to pay more for their auto insurance because of an accident that was not anything where it was their fault. This legislation is intended to ensure that Marylanders who find themselves in a similar situation in the future are protected from the premium increases that I experienced. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 172. I would stand for your questions, and I would like to point out, I do see the senator from an adjoining county in Charles County, and just this month we had a very serious deer accident right outside of La Plata, where one of your constituents was killed as a result of a deer running into traffic and killing somebody in a car. So this is a serious issue, and at some point in time, somebody has to bring this up so we can start talking about this issue. Thank you.
Senator Bailey, thank you. I have a question from Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator, thank you. I appreciate the bill. It does make good sense. Clearly, in somebody's insurance record should not be dinged for the actions of, and I will agree with you, what I consider to be vermin. Those deer are a nightmare, but just one question with regard to your interaction with this deer that ran into your truck while it was sitting perfectly still. Is it possible that that deer recognized you from the tree stand the day before?
I greatly
It may not have been an
appreciate
accident.
I really appreciate that question, and I've got to say, I'm not, even though I'm very familiar with deer, I'm not familiar with their communications abilities.
I think he was communicating with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I can top that from my colleague from Montgomery County. But the exact same thing happened to me, Senator Bailey. I was sitting still at a light, and this deer just came and ran to a brand new car, 3 days old. Yeah, so we have unique deers in Southern Maryland. So, but the thing is that unique to your insurance companies, or all insurance companies would raise rates? Because I don't remember my rates going up when that happened to me with that brand new car a few years ago. So this could be just a problem with your insurance company. It's not really very responsive, or is it insurance companies raise the rate?
When I filed the appeal, that was in talking with the insurance, the people on the Insurance Commission. That there was some suggestion, maybe go ahead and check with different insurers and try to figure out, do you get a better premium here? Can you get, but the fact is, the one I was dealing with, I've been with almost my entire life. And so I was like, I wanted to stay with my local agent, people that I'd grown up with. I just thought that made more sense. And because of the fact that not only that, I don't just have auto insurance with them. We were fortunate enough to have a farm. We have our farm insurance with them. We have our comprehensive policies with them, our home insurance with them. So it was much bigger than just changing my car insurance.
But others, you didn't check out.
So
others,
that was to answer your question in a roundabout way. Yes, they said that that the law had never been changed to address this, and that they could in fact charge that.
Yes, they could, but you don't know if all.
I don't know that all do that.
Okay, all right. I'm curious to know that, so I'll check that out. Thank you.
Senator Ellis, if I can weigh in a minute, my policy says comprehensive is fire, lightning, wind, hail, flood, and contact with an animal. And so not every policy would charge that as an accident. But that's up to the carrier.
Okay, great.
So considering I have like 13 deer in my yard at any given time, I'm happy my policy doesn't charge if I hit one.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick, when you're beginning your testimony, all this deer gets people excited, but you filed an appeal and you had an appeal. And I'm assuming in your appeal, you argued that you couldn't be responsible for this because you're innocent. I mean, you were just standing there and the deer ran, you're sitting in your vehicle and the deer ran into your vehicle. And what happened during that appeal? You said that someone said that they're going to increase your rates because they can.
That's correct.
And what was the basis or the amount for the increase? And was it just, did they have a wide margin, or can you give a little more explanation of what happened there?
Senator, I appreciate the question. And that's the whole reason that we're here right now, is because of that discussion. Because when I filed the appeal, and this wasn't the fact that I arbitrarily filed this, right? When I was a young man, I got a commercial driver's license and I started driving tractor trailers, and I've driven professionally my whole life. And I have, knock on wood, been very fortunate where I've never gotten a traffic citation that resulted in any type of a conviction whatsoever. Right. I do remember getting a warning one time when I was a young person, but not any type of traffic infraction, anything like that. And and the only thing that I'd ever had where I'd made a claim was in a parking lot. Right, incident. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me that I could have been driving this way and have a clean driving record and all of a sudden face a 26% issue. And they were, if I can find the letter, they did say that they wouldn't raise my premium if I was willing to drop all the insurance that I had against myself. But that was what happened when we went to the hearing and we talked about it. That was where it came out. They were like, well, the more I questioned the issue and how could this be, that's when they said, we've never addressed this in years, right? And and I said, well, we haven't, the insurance companies haven't addressed the fact that the deer population is increasing, that we've got all these more cars in Maryland. This has never been addressed. And they said, no. And I said, well, how can this be raised when I was sitting stationary? And I also had the person that was in front of me and behind me gave me statements. They were like, because I was like, holy smokes. I don't know how, I said, I don't know that I've ever had a case, even being a policeman, where I remember somebody sitting stationary on dual lane highway and a deer running into them, right? I said, I want to get your name and information. And when I got the premium increase, I can remember telling my wife, I said, this got to be a joke. couldn't happen. And then when we went through the appeal process, it still came back as it supported them. And the thing was, in the hearing, they said, we're doing it because we can. Nobody's ever addressed the law. And that's why we're here today. And that's why I worked with staff to try to do it, to figure a way to make a change to the law that would not have such a negative impact. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your testimony. And now we will have two unfavorables. Matt Overtoff from NAMIC and Jason Weintraub.
Yeah. Chair Bidle, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Overturf on behalf of the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. We respectfully request an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 172. If passed, the bill would prohibit insurers from increasing premiums based on claims history under certain circumstances. The fiscal note draws an even more concerning, broader interpretation, suggesting that the bill would not allow an insurer to increase premium based on any number of collisions with other vehicles or property unless the insured has made 3 or more claims for collisions with wild animals under the bill's specifications. Because this bill would limit insurers' ability to accurately price and assess risk, if enacted, Senate Bill 172 would likely not lower cost of insurance, instead would likely create an additional upward pressure on auto insurance premiums. For these reasons, I request an unfavorable report to Senate Bill 172. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Bidle, Vice Chair Klausmeyer, members of the committee. For the record, Jason Weintraub here on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. APCIA members write more than half of the personal auto market here in Maryland. We echo Mr. Overturf's concerns and NAMIC's. The only thing I would add is that this bill as drafted limits the ability of companies to underwrite the risk of an insured based on their claim history. I'd point you to the additional comments in the fiscal note that also outline some of the sort of unknowns with the bill as drafted. We would respectfully request an unfavorable report as well.
Mr. Weintraub, if the bill was corrected to say the rates couldn't be increased for hitting an animal, would that be a better way to approach this?
I believe that's certainly covered under comprehensive policies right now. So I'm not sure talking about collisions and hitting an animal is necessarily clears it up, Madam Chair.
Well, listening to Senator Bailey, he talked about he was increased because actually the animal hit him. And I've been sitting here Googling comprehensive insurance, comprehensive auto insurance, various companies, and repeatedly theft, glass breakage, fire, floods, and hail, hitting an animal. Every time I Google, it comes up that hitting an animal is comprehensive coverage. So I guess we just need to tighten up the bill.
I'm happy to get more information for you on that, but
Thank
we
you.
would still disagree. Thank you.
Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but in the interest of time, you hit what I was trying to get at much more succinctly. So that was the same question I had basically, but you did it much better. So I'm confirmed.
Senator Kramer, more deer jokes?
Well, I still have my concerns about, I certainly won't be wearing any Elmer Fudd hats in my car. That's for sure. There's some rogue deer out there. My question was very similar to yours, Madam Chair, in that if there's a concern about something in the bill that maybe, expands the intention beyond, or expands the impact beyond the intention of the bill sponsor, could you share with us what that concern is? And then that could be specifically addressed. And so that we get to the goal. And I understand the industry is not going to be satisfied because they're going to want to be able to throw out as much as they can into the mix as to what will result in increased premiums. But to address that specific issue that you both raised, can you specify what that concern is now, or do you want to just take a look at it, get back to us, and then with the understanding you still oppose the bill regardless?
Sure. If I could, I would have to take that back to my members and have them take a look at that, but I'm happy to circle back with the chair and the committee on that.
Okay, That would be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. There are no other questions for this panel. Thank you very much. And that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 172. We now go to Senate Bill 144. Senator Hedelman, would you like to bring up your panel? Senator, will you confirm who your panel is, please?
Sure. Could I ask them to introduce themselves? My name is Shelley Hedelman, Senator from District 11, and I'm happy to be here before you today to present Senate Bill 144, which has to do with medical records and the fees associated with them. To my right is Scott London.
Hi, would you like me to start testifying or?
Nope, just
I would like to, I don't have everyone here listed on the panel, so I'd like to know who the members are of the panel.
Sure.
So, you're Scott London. Stephanie Means. Thank you, Stephanie. Your name, please?
I'm Andrew Sindler.
Andrew, thank you. And
Arun Malhotra.
thank you. And
Brianne Riley.
Brianne, thank you. So you're not, it's fine. You're not all listed as panelists. I just wanted to make sure some other people didn't sneak in.
Sure.
Say that. Thank you. So Senator, would you like to start? You have
Yes,
as much
please.
time as you need.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. A couple of years ago, the General Assembly passed a bill that changed an important law. And it said that patients who are on Social Security disability or supplemental security income would not have to pay for duplication of their medical records. And in our infinite wisdom, we thought that this is an important principle to put on the books to say that people who are going through a process of appeal and trying to get medical records from in usually complicated cases would not have to pay. They're often low income, they're often physically challenged, and it's a difficult process to get all of these records. And we included in that law personal representatives. We did not include attorneys. Now, some might argue that attorneys are personal representatives, but some may not. And so what we are here to do today is to clarify and add attorneys to that group of individuals who can get these medical records at no cost. It's a pretty straightforward, simple bill. I will say you have in your testimony a letter of concern, I would say, from Steve Wise, who we all know representing MedChi, and he has spoken with folks on the panel here and texted me this morning saying he could not be here, but he believes that there is a way that we can work something out. So removes his objection.
Senator, if I can just tell so all of you know, there's like 5 pages of favorables, and the only favorable with amendment is Mr. Wise. So you're good.
Yep.
Certainly everyone can have a minute, but
yes,
we don't need.
we were in the brevity is
Thank you.
in the interest of the committee. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Scott London. I'm an attorney and owner of London Disability. And I want to thank Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair and members of this committee for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 144. Also, Senator Hedelman, thank you for your help and support. So I have dedicated my professional career to helping the disabled navigate the Social Security disability process. And it's a challenging, difficult process going through the federal government. As Senator Hedelman said, in 2021, the legislature passed Health General 4304C5. The problem is that attorneys were not listed as one of the groups that could access free medical records for their clients. So what's happening? We're representing a client. We're preparing for an administrative hearing in front of a judge, and we have to get records from multiple providers. My staff and I are going into our client's medical record portal. We're uploading the records. We're then downloading them into our file server. We're then sending them electronically to Social Security. There's about a 4-step process that has some technology involved that most of my clients cannot handle by themselves. But here's the rub. The medical record provider is sending me an invoice for those records. I'm then sending that invoice to my client. So my client is still on the hook to pay the medical record expense, which is contrary to what Annapolis said in 2021, that records for disabled individuals should be free. So my ask today is that this committee issue a favorable report for Senate Bill 144. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm a little nervous. My name is Stephanie Means. I suffer from a lot of problems such as fibromyalgia, seizures, syncope, rheumatoid arthritis in my right knee, migraines, depression, anxiety, and so on. It is very hard for me to get my medical records. When I filed myself for the disability, I was denied, which in turn, I obtained Scott London as my lawyer. If I didn't have him for my lawyer, I don't think I would be sitting where I'm at today. He dug and dug and dug for my records and wouldn't give up until they was given to him.
Thank you very much. You did very well. The nervousness didn't show. Thank you, Stephanie. Arun Malhotra, want to go next?
Right there.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Senate Committee. My name is Arun Malhotra. I'm the Director of Case Management at London Disability, and my work for the past 12 years has focused on assisting people with serious mental and physical illnesses and helping them with their Social Security disability cases. I appreciate the opportunity to provide my testimony in support of this bill. This bill is critical in my efforts to assist people who have applied for disability benefits due to being seriously ill, are homeless, or facing imminent threat of homelessness. Medical records are imperative to prove a client's disability in front of a judge. However, it's a hardship for the client to get their own medical records as they do not know which records are needed for the hearing. The fees associated with obtaining the medical records are very high, which the client has no funds to pay for. If the client is unable to pay for the records, presenting a disability case before the judge without proper evidence results in a denial or postponement for several months. Clients need the help of their lawyers to obtain these medical records, as most of them do not have computers or fax machines to do so themselves. London Disability pays to obtain these medical records. However, the cost is passed on to the clients as their out-of-pocket expenses. The invoices to obtain these medical records at times are ranging from $100 to $800. And I have some of the invoices here in the folder if somebody's interested to view them. In most cases, the client is unable to reimburse this expense because the client is past due on their living essentials, such as rent, utilities, medication. This bill would ensure that Marylanders who have applied for Social Security disability benefits, who are either low income or are homeless, to access the records they need to secure vital and often life-saving benefits such as monthly income benefits and medical insurance to seek necessary treatment to improve their health. I support the bill and urge a favorable outcome. Thank you.
Breanne Riley.
Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm writing today and I'm a witness today to support this bill. I have been a member of London Disability for the last 5.5 years. I am responsible for assisting clients who have a range of multiple different disabilities get medical records. And one of my tasks is obtaining their medical records and paying invoices. Sometimes clients are asked to go in there on their own to get these medical records if the invoice is high. Some clients do not have money for transportation, nor do they know what records are expected of them. I think it's important that attorneys are added on to the bill because without the attorney, clients don't know what to do. They don't know how to access these records. And in the end, when we do get these cases, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, the clients are left with the burdens of getting the medical records fee that we charge reimbursed. We have to get that back from the client. And if they lost their Social Security case, how would they reimburse us for those fees? So I am in support of this bill and I Hope you guys have a favorable outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sindler?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and the fellow senators on the Senate Finance Committee. I will try to keep this brief. I am going to largely echo the comments by my colleague, Mr. London, who I've known for many years. Just for the record, my name is Andrew Sindler. I am a practicing attorney. I've been doing Social Security law for nearly 20 years. Certainly when the lifeline that was the current iteration of this law that went into effect in 2021 went into effect, it was a game changer, no question about it, until we started seeing some of the, for lack of a better word to use, loopholes that many of these medical providers and third-party companies they use have been using to their advantage to try to keep charging improperly, and cost again being passed along to our clients. And for me personally, being a solo practitioner, I really have to watch my bottom line carefully. I can advance cost and try to pass them along. Maybe my clients can pay them back, maybe they can't. I don't always feel comfortable or right about doing it. But then again, we're in a line of work that our fee structure is already very limited by the statutes under the Federal Social Security Act to begin with. But there is one specific thing I do want to share. I'll make it as brief as possible. Just to give you an idea of the atrocity of what some of these medical records providers actually do. I have had scenarios where I have new potential clients that come to me looking for representation. And as part of my due diligence that I owe them, I ask them to please provide me, if they're able, a representative sampling of their medical records so I can just review to make sure that it's a case that has merit. Well, what ends up happening ultimately, and this has happened a ton recently, is that the medical records provider sees their request, they sign the HIPAA release, it's their request as the patient in line with the current bill. But what ultimately ends up happening is they see that the client wants the records to be sent directly to me to eliminate the middle step because they don't have a fax machine or other equipment. Next thing you know, I'm faced with an invoice for records that are not only not a client of mine, but that I didn't actively request. And that's how these providers are using this loophole to their advantage. This bill will effectively eliminate that, and I respectfully request a favorable report from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Senator Guile.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to go back quickly to the cost of the medical records, because I think it's helpful for the committee to understand. I know I'm a defense attorney on the other side of personal injury cases and had to, obtain medical records before. When you're saying $100 to $800, that's often for just one particular provider. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so sometimes you may have a client who have multiple providers, oftentimes have multiple providers. So you're paying that $100 to $800 fee multiple times. Correct?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
multiple requests sometimes from the same provider, I might add, when we have multiple hearings at different stages of a claim after different levels of appeal. So we have to get updates to those records that we've already requested from the same provider. It's a very
Right.
common practice.
And Mr. Sindler, you touched upon this earlier, but I think it'd also be helpful to explain, because I think sometimes people have a perspective of, personal injury attorneys and what they get paid. And, that sometimes obtaining medical records, these are sort of the upfront expense costs that they have to put in to ultimately see an investment later for a payout.
Right.
But I think it's helpful to explain how what the work you do in the area of law that you practice is different from that fee structure and from that model.
Oh, no question about it, Senator Kyle. To be very brief to the committee here, the work we do is governed by the Federal Social Security Act, and the method for which we can charge is even more restricted. It's restricted not only in the fact that in order for us to get paid, we have to not only win the claim, but the claim has to result in an award of past due benefits, a lump sum that has to catch them up to the present. And it's out of that lump sum that we are entitled to a percentage. The percentage is capped at 25%. It can never be higher than that. And that's, from what I understand, well below the standard rate of regular personal injury matters, which can be anywhere from 1/3 to 40%. Moreover, if the claim is approved at a certain stage, at an administrative law judge hearing or prior thereto, we are further capped by an actual dollar amount fee cap, which is currently $7,200, actually just got raised for the first time in 13 years. It was raised at the end of November of 2022 to $7,200 from $6,000 that it had been at since 2009. So we are already operating under very, very limited circumstances and resources for what we could actually obtain from helping these very, very disabled and disadvantaged individuals. We do it because we're passionate about it. I can certainly speak for Mr. London and his staff and myself. This is what we do. And, any lifeline we can get is definitely a feather in our cap.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sindler. I have a question from Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, thank you all for your testimony, and I have a question. So someone have to pay, right? And so if this bill passed, the medical provider have to pick up the cost.
Mhm.
And I'm remembering when I had my accounting firm a few years ago, I had a client, a nonprofit client, and their records open for public inspection. One of their members requested all the records. It was over like 100,000 pages. I had to copy, and that actually happened. And it costs maybe $2,000-3,000 to copy those. So sometimes the volume could be that big, and we have to be careful. We don't want to do anything to drive our medical providers out of Maryland. So I empathize with you. So the amendment from Mr. Wise, as far as the first set of records covered, is that kind of like okay for y'all, or
Well, so
is that, what do you think about that?
And I could probably let Mr. London speak a little bit more about this, because he's been directly in touch with Mr. Wise, from what I understand. My concern that I had expressed to him earlier today, and I think there's a way we can sort of meet somewhere in the middle and figure this out, is just, again, in many of the instances of these cases, we don't just have one instance of having to request one set of records from each and every provider our clients see for treatment. We oftentimes have to go back to these providers 2 or more times over the pendency of a claim that can drag on for years and years, multiple levels of appeals and remands and you name it. And if the amendment that's being proposed says we get one bite at the apple for free records, but if we have to come back to the same provider, even if we're not requesting duplicates, which we never do. I mean, I can certainly speak for Mr. London's office and myself. We look clearly at what we already have and what's already in the file, and make sure that the request we include for the dates of service starts at the very next day and never goes. And sometimes we still inadvertently get duplicates, even though we haven't requested them. So, my concern would be if we have to go back to a given provider and say, well, now we need the updated records, because if we don't have them, the judge we're going in front of is going to question that. That sort of seems like it kind of defeats the purpose of the intent behind the bill. So that's what I would have to say about that, Scott.
Just to add a couple comments to that. Yes, I did speak with Mr. Wise this morning, and I think we can get to some common ground. There was a few things that he wasn't clear on. One is, in most disability cases, there's 3 stages to the case: an initial application, a reconsideration, then a hearing in front of a judge. And what we're asking for is not all of the records 3 different times. We're only asking for that in that second and third request, updated records. What happened with the treatment since we last got records a year ago? We actually have an ethical duty per Social Security not to submit duplicate records to the agency. So Arun and Brianne do an amazing job of taking a comb through the Social Security file. What records does the government have? Where do we need to pick up from?
Right.
Those are the records that we're ordering.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you.
So we have another question from Senator Guile.
Just one question. These medical records, gone are the days of you dropping off a banker's box at your house or your firm, right? These are often electronically transferred, click of the button.
Yep.
And then you're getting charged like $100 to $800 for a trip. And I'm not dismissing necessarily the administrative burden, I think, of keeping medical records and ensuring HIPAA compliance and transferring that. But and I think you're all nodding your head. We can all agree that 99% of the time, these are electronically transferred, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator, for confirming that. So there are no other questions for this panel. Thank you very much. I have one more witness in favor. You can all leave.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you all very much.
Mr. Jaroshel, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. Madam Chair, my name is Ronald Jaroshel. I'm a former circuit court judge in Anne Arundel County. I went back into law practice in 2011. I reiterate many of which the things that the lawyer said. There are a couple of things I want to try to fill in for you for your understanding. The standard by which somebody has to qualify for Social Security disability is a very high bar. It's they have to show that they have no reasonable ability to perform substantial work. And that means, as I used to tell my clients, if you can sit behind a gas station window and take money from people, you can work, and you may be denied Social Security disability. Many of those people have either one very significant disability, which substantial medical history, as you've heard from the other lawyers, or multiple healthcare providers of a long history, and you have to collect all those records to submit to Social Security in order to prove you have a lack of ability to work. And all that's very important. And the thing they're talking about where you request those records as a lawyer or not, the client can request the records, but the law typically says if you're sending them to your lawyer, they can charge you whatever. There's no limit on what the provider can charge. And one of the issues that we have as well with this is that it says the healthcare provider under 5 or a representative of the healthcare provider. Many of us get our records through a third-party provider service. And we would hope that that phraseology would be interpreted to apply to the third-party service. In my position paper that we submitted, I cited the Ciox case, which is the prominent case that said that the patient can get the discounted rate, but the lawyer cannot. With that, I would ask you to give a favorable report to this Senate Bill 144.
Do I have any questions? Thank you for alerting us to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 144, and now we'll go to Senate Bill 336. Vice Chair Klausmeier. Can I call up your panel in the meantime? I can do it. I can do it. Sorry. Senator Klausmeier's panel is Luke Pinton and Vincent Ryan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the wonderful Committee of Finance. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Luke Pinton. I'm here on behalf of the League of Life and Health Insurers and the American Council of Life Insurers.
My name is Vince Ryan, and I am here on behalf of the American Council of Life Insurers.
Okay. Senate Bill 336, producer licensing requirements, education and experience. Senate Bill 336 is a straightforward bill to remove the pre-licensing education mandate for those applying to become an insurance producer. Anybody seeking to become an insurance producer would still have to pass the licensing exam and meet all other requirements. This bill only removes the requirement that the applicants also certify that they have completed an educational course and have been employed in the field for at least 1 year out of the past 3 years. On paper, these pre-licensing mandates are meant to ensure that the applicants are prepared for licensing exam and are better qualified to work in the insurance industry. However, in reality, research has shown that these mandates do not actually produce better candidates and only serve as an additional barrier of entry into the field. Reports from states with no pre-licensing mandates suggest that many candidates for license will take a course or otherwise study to prepare for the exam, even without any mandate. The difference is that those candidates had more freedom to study in a way that best fits their schedule, budget, or study habits. By removing the mandates, candidates will be able to study in a way that fits their needs and situation. These barriers are particularly important when we consider the varying needs of those who may be caregivers considering insurance as a second career, or who come from non-traditional educational backgrounds. 2 states, Alabama and Washington, have enacted legislation to remove pre-licensing education mandates so far, and I am hopeful that Maryland can become the 3rd. I thank the committee for their time and ask for a favorable report. So. Go ahead, Luke. Wait a minute, I just remembered too that Luke came down today and there will be an amendment. I'm gonna let him explain that.
Okay, I'll do my best to do so, but good afternoon, everyone.
Somebody.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Beidle, members of the committee. And thank you, Senator Klausmeyer, for bringing this bill. My name is Luke Pinton, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Life and Health Insurers of Maryland and the American Council of Life Insurers in support of Senate Bill 336 and Senator Klausmeyer's efforts to reduce barriers to entry for applicants to be an insurance producer. Sitting beside me is Vince Ryan, Regional Vice President of State Relations for ACLI, who is on hand here to share his expertise on the broader value of repealing the pre-licensure education requirement. Before turning it over, I wanted to thank again Senator Klausmeyer as well as the MIA for their consideration of this proposal. For the committee's information, we passed a draft of this proposal to the MIA last fall, and the bill as introduced that you see before you here is the version that the MIA was comfortable with. And without further ado, I'll turn it over here to Vince from ACLI so that he can provide further information to the committee.
Thank you and good afternoon. Again, Vince Ryan on behalf of the American Council of Life Insurers. I want to thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for your sponsorship of this bill. With that, this bill really stems from an effort that ACLI, working with a lot of our insurance agent and producer counterparts, including NAIFA and SECA, we've been working with state insurance regulators over the past several years to reduce barriers to entry into the insurance agent career space. Barriers such as pre-licensing education mandates prevent qualified candidates from entering and remaining in the industry. As Madam Vice Chair said, these are all of the things that an individual would have to complete before they can even start studying and then take the exam to become a licensed insurance agent. Oftentimes, these individuals might have a job already and they are looking to branch out into a second career as an insurance agent, and they would have to take time out of their own day, out of their own work day to go and apprentice at a license or at a insurance agency. They would have to obtain certain designations such as with the National Association of Life Underwriters, again, before they can even obtain or sit to take the exam. Just a couple of points I'll emphasize is that recently or in the past several years, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners Producer Licensing Task Force did determine that pre-licensing mandates do not achieve the goal of ensuring candidates are prepared for the profession. Research has shown that these mandates don't produce candidates more prepared to pass the exam necessarily, and that states without a mandate. Well, the final point that I'll make is that over half of the country does not have these pre-licensing mandates on the books, including I believe Delaware. I know New Jersey does not have them, and so we're hoping that Maryland will join those ranks, and so we ask for a favorable report from the committee.
Mr. Ryan, I have a question. So this person is supposed to work in an agency or in the field, but they can't talk directly to a client and discuss coverage in that if they're not licensed, correct?
I believe that to be correct. I don't, the mandate wouldn't necessarily, I think it's just working within an insurance agency. It doesn't, the statute doesn't necessarily specify in what capacity.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions for this panel? Thank you. We have one virtual person in favor, Roger Moore. Mr. Moore, you're muted.
Hey, sorry about that. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Roger Moore. I'm the Policy Director with the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, or NAIFA. Many thanks to the Chair and the entire committee for letting us comment briefly today in support of Senate Bill 336. Just quickly, NAIFA represents the interest of more than 20,000 licensed insurance agents and advisors across the country. Our chapter in Maryland currently has more than 250 members serving their communities across the state. I'm going to reiterate some of the points that Vince just made regarding SB 336. NAIFA strongly supports the elimination of these pre-licensing education mandates, and we do for a few reasons. First, we think the requirements are ineffective and outdated. As Vince said, when you look at some of the data sets from NAIC and other entities, there really isn't a direct correlation between the presence of pre-licensing requirements and exam outcomes. And the current landscape proves this. Again, as Vince said, more than half of the states in the U.S., 26 to date, plus Washington, D.C., have safely removed the pre-licensing mandates. And they've been able to do so without any reported harm to their workforces or their clients. Second, the data shows that by and large, prospective agents are going to study for their licensing exams, even if they're not required to do so by the state. One survey in Texas, for example, asked, I believe, 9,000 applicants about their study habits. More than 70% reported that they had received training directly from an insurance company, or they had completed coursework on their own time and at their own pace. Of those 9,000 who were surveyed, only about 100 reported not preparing for the exam at all before taking it. And then last, again, to touch on some of the barriers that Vince mentioned, we think it's important to remove any of the unnecessary barriers that may serve as a disadvantage to underrepresented populations. When you think about those who work multiple jobs or work outside of typical business hours, or anyone who might have child caring or domestic caregiving responsibilities, they really could benefit from the added flexibility that would result from the elimination of these mandates. So for these reasons, NAIFA certainly supports the passage of 336, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Wrong way. Do I have any questions for Mr. Moore? None. Thank you very much for your testimony. So
thank you.
That ends the hearing for Senate Bill 336.
It was 3 different.
And next we will go to Senator Klausmeier, you'll stay there, and we'll go to Senate Bill 178. I'm just reading, and we have Senator Augustine here because it's duly assigned. So thank you, Senator Augustine.
And this is my panel list. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Michael Wolpers. I'm with the Natural Places Committee of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club.
And with us today, we have the good Senator Malcolm Augustine, since this is also going to be over in Triple E. This is my panel. List. Yeah. What that was like. Senate Bill 178, Pollinator Habitat Plan Requirements for State Highway Administration. Good afternoon, Chair Bidle and fellow members of the great Senate Finance Committee. I am here today to present Senate Bill 178, Pollinator Habitat Plan Requirements for State Highway Administration. Across the state of Maryland, pollinator species such as butterflies and bumblebees are threatened with extinction due to a widespread shortage of habitats. Most crops require pollination, which means that these pollinators play a vital role in Maryland's ecosystem and agricultural industry. Senate Bill 178 will address this problem by ensuring that the pollinator habitats along state highways are developed and maintained using native plants. These meadows will also provide filtration of surface runoff and prevent erosion along the highways, the state highways. State Highway Administration has already been developing pollinator-friendly sites under the Pollinator Habitat Plan, but the total area of these sites is not sufficient to protect habitats and prevent the loss of these crucial insects. The areas along highways have the potential to provide much larger pollinator meadows. The bill was also, will also require state highways to track federal funding opportunities related to the pollinator habitat plan, update the pollinator habitat plan annually, and publish an annual report on the location and the size of any pollinator habitats maintained by SHA. I am aware that SHA's letter of information, they suggest SHA be allowed to consider the reasonableness of pursuing a particular policy or funding opportunity. So we may need a little amendment for that, but this makes sense, and neither I nor the House sponsor have any issue with this suggestion. And I would like to thank the committee for their time and ask for a favorable report. And I couldn't figure out at first how State Highway was doing these, but they're not doing them currently on the highways, but the welcome centers and state buildings. So they have been doing some of them, but it's very critical that we do this. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Chair Beidle, Vice Chair Klausmeier, and the Finance Committee. The Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club strongly supports SB 178 to help reverse drastic declines in pollinators through minor adjustments to vegetation management along more than 5,000 miles of state roads. Nearly a third of all bumblebees are threatened with extinction in North America, as are 20% of butterflies. In Maryland, 3 of our 15 bumblebee species have disappeared entirely, and 3 others are now rare, as is the Maryland state butterfly, the Baltimore checker spot. Causing these declines, as you've heard, is a shortage of flowers and habitats that these pollinators need for food and shelter, both of which can be provided by well-managed roadsides. For this reason, a wide range of states from Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas to Minnesota, Vermont, and Virginia are already managing their roadways to promote habitat for the beautiful monarch butterfly and other pollinators. As you heard, in Maryland, a law requiring pollinator habitat plans for state agencies was passed in 2016, prompting the Department of Transportation to study whether our roads in this state could also be managed to provide pollinator habitat. That 3-year study in Frederick and Carroll counties showed that with the minor adjustments to vegetation management, roadsides supported 68 species of native plants and 83 species of native bees, nearly a fifth of all Maryland bees. The study found that these practices show, quote, great potential in supporting pollinators and are timely and practical to implement on a landscape scale, close quote. SB 178 would require SHA to develop pollinator habitat plans specifically for roadsides and to follow the Federal Highway Administration's guidelines for roadside pollinators. These guidelines promote pollinator habitat only where safety is not compromised. In addition, studies have shown that varied roadside vegetation, rather than a uniform look, combats driver fatigue, enhances driver alertness, and improves overall highway safety. Earlier this month, the Federal Monarch and Pollinator Highway Act went into effect, which provides grants to states for funding pollinator-friendly practices along their roadways. For all these reasons, we believe SB 178 has outstanding potential. We urge the committee to support the bill and recommend its passage to the General Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkers. We have a question from Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Beidle. Thank you for bringing the bill. Senator Klausmeier, we looked at similar legislation last year, and one of the things that came up was concerns with regard to noxious weeds and the ability for those to transfer seeds and stuff like that. The agricultural community was concerned, and we had an amendment that just suggested that this type of legislation would not interfere with state or local law as it pertained to weed control. Would that be something that you would be open to?
I guess so. I mean, if it's going to screw up the agriculture,
Yeah.
we need to work with the farmers. So
Yeah, that's just
we'll
kind of the
come
point.
up with something,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just add that in that 3-year study, one of the scenarios that was looked at was there were 3 scenarios, controls, meaning the usual management. Another was just mowing once per year. not during the growing season. And the third, which produced the highest degree of diversity of plants, was selective herbicide application, which, as you can imagine, was directed specifically at non-native invasive plants of the kind you're mentioning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not sure who's next. Senator Ellis.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Vice Chair, for this bill. So when this bill came, I know we talked about this last time. My concern was, the state highway doing a good job of not just having the meadows and just growing wild and have trash in there. And because I deal with the issue ever since I've been here and putting bills to clean up the highways, especially in the black and brown areas of the state. State highway was ignoring them. So I'm happy to say that the Moore administration came in and did Operation Clean Sweep, and my county, Prince George's County, or other areas are much cleaner now. So I think this administration is much more in step with allowing this to go forward. Because one thing I hate is for the meadows to grow high and trash is in there, and and State Highway could say, well, it's a meadow, we don't cut it, and we don't pick up the trash, and those issues. And so as a beekeeper, I welcome more bees and more pollination sources. And also for the bumblebees, we have different, and for the butterflies and monarch butterflies, different flowers that attract them in our yard. And so that's very essential and could be very beautiful. And so definitely I would just kind of, do you think the state, my question is, would hire horticulturalists or individuals under this bill to really plan these meadows and to prevent, like Senator Augustine mentioned, noxious weeds and going to farms and stuff like that? Would it be a plan to add staff and horticulturalists to really manage these meadows, or just let it grow wild?
I believe there will be some plans. I believe in MDOT's letter, and I think I read it there that they will. Senate Bill 178 requires the State Highway Administration pollinator habitat plan to include policies and procedures there to encourage the use of pollinator-friendly native plants along state highways, and to develop and maintain pollinator habitat areas along the state highway. So I think they're part of this. They didn't, they wrote this letter, and I think they're not just saying we're going to do it. I think they really have the goodness of the bill at stake. So
okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that.
I think so.
Yeah. And I'll just add that in a presentation of the State Highway Administration's draft new highway management procedures, which was coming out, supposed to come out this month, got delayed till May. But in their management sequence of about 6 or 8 procedures, one of them is a pre-mow trash pickup. And it's right there in the schedule, month by month. And
and thank you for that. And the states you mentioned that have these meadows, it's really conscientious what they do and how they do it. So North Carolina, they have a tourism enhancement fund. It's a special tax that goes on hotel rooms and other tourism functions that maintain these meadows and the highway. And so it's intentional with horticulturalists and a funding source to keep doing that, and not just basically throwing out there and say, oh yeah, let it grow. And so I'm really concerned about that intentionality and make sure it's there for our highways.
And the federal government has a plan and will be giving money to the state, correct?
It's available if they apply.
Oh,
They
have to
apply for that, yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
So, and that's one of their missions too, so.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that,
One of their
Senator.
charges,
Sir.
so. But my only complaint with you, Senator, is we have not seen any honey from you. So we do expect a little taste
Yeah.
of your honey.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Senator Augustine could comment on that, but so.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you may have just touched on it, but I want to be sure. So the fiscal note says there's not a lot of cost to this. I guess we're dealing with problems with our transportation trust fund funding, and I know it says $50,000, so it's okay, what's $50,000? Well, stuff all adds up at some point. Did you say that federal funds are available?
Yes, and they
Okay.
have to apply.
They have to
State
apply, so they can
action.
get the funding only if we get some federal help on this. We don't have to do, we don't do,
I-
we would do this if there's federal help.
Well, we don't have to, I don't think. But we are going to strongly encourage them to get the federal funds, and that's part of the bill saying that they do that. And as I said, there will be an amendment that at the end of the letter, they say SHA suggests that committee allow the administration to consider reasonableness of pursuing the many policies and funding opportunities available. So,
That's fantastic. I love the
Okay.
bees. Just want to be sure we try to find a way to
yeah.
protect our
And,
funds.
and I know, I looked at the $50,000 and that's exactly what I thought. But then we think about if we don't have bees, we won't have honey.
Also
I
true.
mean, and that's not to be funny, but that's a real problem. And not only honey, but so many other things that they pollinate.
No,
So,
it's true. No, hopefully we can find some sources
Yes.
of funding. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm thinking that maybe there'll be some cost savings on mowing if we have wildflowers growing in the middle
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of tall grass and weeds. So thank you.
you.
Thank you for
Point
presenting
well
the bill.
taken.
We have one virtual witness, Steve McDaniel. Daniel, you're on mute.
Still,
There you go.
okay. Hello, Madam Chairman. Pleased to be here. My name is Steve McDaniel. I'm a master beekeeper, backyard beekeeper, just 20 colonies in my yard. That's McDaniel Honey Farm. And I represent the Smart on Pesticides Coalition, group of which I am a member. And there are 114 groups and 53 beekeepers have signed on to the testimony that we've provided in writing. This bill can really be summed up in 5 words. Plant flowers, don't poison them. As you know, pollinators are in trouble. We've already heard that butterflies, moths, all sorts of insects are dying. And it's mostly because of insecticides that are killing the insects that go to flowers, because the insecticides used on the flowers poison the food source. As you know, you can drive through the country at night and come home with a clean windshield. You used to have to clean off your windshield. Now there are very few insects flying around that can mess up your car. Bees get all their food from flowers. They eat only nectar and pollen when they're available, but there are often not enough flowers available. So many of the flowers they go to are poisoned by insecticides applied by homeowners and farmers. Having a source of food that is widespread, such as along the roads, and is safe for them to eat would be a great benefit to all pollinators. You can make that happen by directing the State Highway Administration to seek funding from the federal government so that these plantings can happen. So I'm speaking in favor of Bill 178. I hope you will pass it. So please plant flowers, but don't poison them. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony, Mr. McDaniel. Do I have any questions for Mr. McDaniel? And no other questions for the panel? Thank you. The hearing on Senate Bill 178 is complete. And our last bill of the day is Senate Bill 142, and it is also Vice Chair Klausmeyer's bill.
And thank you, Senator Augustine, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye. Senator Klausmeyer, you have Janice Sublett, Lindsay Gill, and Nicholas Maragakis as your panel.
Yes.
If they would come up too, please.
And you might recognize Jenna, but she has a different last name because since last year she got married.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Bidle and fellow members of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm here today to present Senate Bill 142, the Genetic Testing Protection Act of 2024. At the federal level, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA, passed 15 years ago to prevent health insurers and employers for discriminating against an individual based on their genetic information. This was a great step forward to protect individuals seeking genetic testing, but unfortunately, this legislation did not extend to three types of insurances: life, long-term care, or disability insurance. Senate Bill 142 would have Maryland join the 14 other states that have built on GINA to apply to these types of insurance. The intent of this legislation is to avoid the types of discrimination that patients with familiar disease and cancers can experience. Genetic tests are helpful information for patients when they make life decisions, including securing a life insurance policy for themselves and or their families. They should not be treated differently, discriminated against, or delay receiving a genetic test because they fear an insurer's denial or rates being increased due to their genetics. To help go into more detail on the data, I am accompanied on my sponsor panel by Ms. Lindsay Gill from the ALS Association, Dr. Nicholas Margagas, who works at Johns Hopkins as the director of the Center for ALS Specialty Care, and Jenna Sublett, who can help answer any questions you may have. You will also hear from individuals who have firsthand experience dealing with the hardship families face with declining the best course of action for their care. I would like to thank the committee for their time and ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 142.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Beidel and members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 142. My name is Jenna Sublett, and I work with Cornerstone Government Affairs here on behalf of our client ALS Association. Thank you to our incredible sponsor, Vice Chair Klossmeyer. I want to take a moment to distinguish the difference between genetic testing and a diagnosis. Genetic test means a lab test of human chromosomes, genes, or gene products that's used to identify the presence or absence of alterations in genetic material that are associated with a disease or illness. A diagnosis identifies an individual's confirmation of a disease or illness. A genetic marker does not always progress to a disease. Regardless of the outcome, individuals have the right to know about their genes, learn from them, and they should not be treated differently due to their genetics. For those who are concerned that this legislation could lead to increased rates for policyholders, we have not seen any data to support this. Over the interim, we had a 50-state outreach to see if anyone in the insurance administration could send us data to show that their market had been impacted by having a protection in place. Not one state sent us information or data to support that. Maryland is not the first state to introduce this legislation. Florida has had a law in place since 2020, and there are also 13 other states that have patchwork protections, including Maryland, passed this law in 2008 specific to long-term care insurance. Also, as of right now, there are 5 other states that have introduced bills this year similar to ours: Illinois, New York, South Carolina, Iowa, and Delaware. You may hear that this has never been done, but this is not a new concept. And the ALS Association is not the only one fighting for this. I'd ask that you refer to my written testimony, which shows the support from our coalition of organizations. Thanks for your time, and we request a favorable report for Senate Bill 142.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel and members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for the chance to testify in support of Senate Bill 142. My name is Lindsay Gill, and I am the Managing Director of Advocacy at the ALS Association, serve in Maryland. Thank you to Senator Klossmeyer for introducing this legislation. I would first like to address that it is not our intention for this legislation to negatively impact the life insurance market. We want people to get genetic testing and life insurance, but affordably. Our bill does not prevent insurers from accessing an individual's medical record as part of an application exam. In some cases, genetic test results can prevent a patient from getting a life insurance policy. There are also times that patients are offered coverage at an extremely high premium. That is what our bill addresses, avoiding discrimination as it concerns issuance and price protection. An important distinction that is that a genetic test indicates potential health risks. It is not a diagnostic exam and should not be treated as such by life insurers. For well over 125 years, life insurers and applicants did not have genetic testing information, and their business has managed to flourish. Life insurers claim that they will never require a patient to receive a genetic test to obtain a policy, but we do not have any law in place that supports that. Medical records for the purpose of medical underwriting have been used for decades. It's unfair for insurers to base issuance and pricing decisions on private and personal genetic information, and it is completely unnecessary for the sustainability of their business. Genetic testing and genetic counseling are crucial to family members that have ALS, as it helps to inform prevention, future treatment options, innovative breakthroughs for this devastating disease, and important life decisions. Despite all the progress that has been made for the ALS community, there have been multiple studies and real-life examples that show that the fear of genetic information being used against them is one of the reasons people say they do not get tested. Thus, the threat of genetic discrimination creates a serious dilemma for Marylanders: risk their physical health because they do not know their genetic status, or risk their financial health because they do. For all these reasons, I respectfully request your support for the Genetic Testing Protection Act.
Honorable Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Klausmeyer, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Nicholas Maragakis. I'm a professor of neurology and director of the Johns Hopkins Center for ALS Specialty Care, as well as the Johns Hopkins ALS Clinical Trials Unit. I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 142. Patients with ALS have an inexorable course that results in limb weakness, loss of speech, loss of swallowing, and patients eventually die of respiratory failure about 2 to 5 years after the onset of symptoms. And over the last 20 years, I've taken care of thousands of Marylanders with ALS, and I've watched this taken a toll not only on the individuals, but their family members as well. While it's oft quoted that only 10% of ALS patients have a genetic cause for their disease, newer data suggest that the percentages are likely much higher. There are now over 40 ALS-related genes that can be identified with just a simple mouth swab, and those results can be available in 2 weeks. 10 years ago, when I would test ALS patients for gene mutations, it was mostly to inform them of the cause of their disease and to educate their family members that they had a 50% chance of inheriting these same genes and potentially developing ALS. But the landscape, through advancements in gene therapy, have now changed. Last year, families affected by a particularly common gene in the United States called SOD1 ALS were given hope when the Food and Drug Administration approved a drug called tofersen, the first gene therapy for ALS. More are on the way. In pioneering work that includes our efforts at Hopkins, we hope to be able to treat family members who carry the SOD1 ALS gene before they even develop symptoms of ALS. It's a real game changer. However, many of our ALS patients, and particularly family members, are afraid that their genetic information may be used to discriminate against them. And I'm concerned this will result in their missing out on potential gene therapies that could significantly impact their health. Therefore, I respectfully request your support of the Genetic Testing Protection Act. Thank you to the members of the Senate Finance Committee for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. And Dr. Markakis, thank you for your work in this field. But thank you to all of you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I don't see any. Next, we'll have Brian Schaefer, Matt Kramer, John Knowles, Lisa Peabody, and Ellen Engel. All favorable. Anyone can begin, please.
Hello, Chair Beidel, members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Matt Kramer, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 142. Several of you I know through my work here at the General Assembly as Delegate Wells, Chief of Staff. However, today I am before you as a son who lost his mother to ALS on November 1st, 2021. My mama, Ann Kramer, was a devout Christian, a fierce advocate for children, and lived a selfless life that inspired so many around the world. My mom is the strongest person I've ever known. Watching her fight this disease, all while continuing to be the kind, generous, and compassionate mom she was, is a strength most of us will never see in our lifetime. During my mom's final months, she requested genetic testing be done because she did not want to leave this life, knowing that there was a possibility her ALS could be familial and that could be passed down to one of her children. For weeks, we all waited. My mom's case ended up being sporadic, but had it ended differently, her children would have had to take this test to know what could be ahead for us. My family and I are in a place of privilege that we would be able to tackle these things head on, but so many facing ALS are not. My mom was never able to get the long-term care insurance she needed, so my father and I were at her side all day, every day, even the moment she passed away in my arms. Because we had that ability, other families are not that fortunate. It's shameful to think that we would put profit over the dignity of someone's life, over my mother's life, or over any of us here. And by letting this bill fail, that's what we would be doing. Discriminating against someone because of a disease that we don't know the cause for is disgraceful. There are no preventative measures. There is no cure. There's just giving dignity to the end of life that we deserve. It is with that I ask for your support for Senate Bill 142.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. I'm sorry, very sorry to hear about your mom. Next, Mr. Schaefer.
Chairwoman Bidel, excuse me, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Brian Schaefer and I live in Bel Air, Maryland. ALS has robbed me of 4 members of my family: my grandmother, my aunt, my sister, and my father. In 2 of those 4 cases, I watched firsthand them little by little lose all their physical abilities until they ultimately lost their lives. I watched my dad trying to provide for his family, trying to continue working for the gas company, even when he could barely move his arms to lift things. I watched him almost choke to death at our kitchen table because near the end of his life, because he was having trouble swallowing. I remember running to a neighbor's house to get her because she was a nurse and she was able to save his life. I watched my sister, who was a teacher, in her classroom with a microphone because she could barely speak and wanted to be able to continue teaching as long as she could. I had to feed my sister because she could not feed herself anymore, something no brother should have to do for his sister. ALS is a horrific, cruel, painful way to die that I would not wish on my worst enemy. Now, as a proud father of 7 children, I am faced with something even worse than what I went through with my dad and sister, and that is the prospect that my children will not get the genetic testing available that can tell them if they have any of the genes that lead to ALS. Right now, we are fearful they will not be able to get life insurance coverage in the future should it be discovered that they have the genes that can lead to ALS. My children are young. Getting a life insurance policy right now is not on their radar, but potentially getting a genetic test is. While there is no cure for ALS, knowing they have the gene that can cause it would allow my children to be able to watch for any symptoms of the disease. And if they ever have any symptoms of ALS, they could immediately start medical treatments that prolong their life and improve their quality of life while living with the disease. Just because someone tests that they have any of the genes that can lead to ALS does not mean that they will get the disease. It is not fair for insurance companies to discriminate against someone who gets the testing done and tests positive. I ask you to please pass this bill. It's hard enough to get tested knowing you could have one of the ALS genes, but could make it even harder because you're afraid you will not be able to get life insurance in the future. Please support this bill for my children and their future. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Bidel and members of the Finance Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about Senate Bill 142. This important piece of legislation could save the lives of future generations, potentially including my relatives and children. My name is John Knowles. My wife, Terry, was diagnosed with ALS in March of 2021. Her identical twin sister, Mary, died from ALS in 2013, and her sister, Patty, died from it in 2020. When Mary was diagnosed, there was no history of ALS in our family. Diagnosis was done through a process of elimination, as there are no blood tests or any tests for that matter that confirm the diagnosis. There are, however, genetic tests that indicate a person may have a gene that is linked to ALS, but even these tests can only provide a possibility. Terry comes from a family of 7 sisters. All were married and together produced 16 children, and currently a next generation of 5 children with 2 more on the way. including our first grandchild. The children, including my own, are all at a time in their lives when they are marrying and adding to the family. Several of them have undergone genetic testing, but most of them have not. It is sobering when the geneticist doing the testing warns you that if you carry a gene defect linked to ALS, it will likely cause you to either pay higher life insurance rates or be denied insurance altogether. So they suggest if you're contemplating getting life insurance, you should get it before you get tested. Back in 2009, when Mary was diagnosed, the prognosis was bleak and there was only one drug available to help slow the progress of ALS. Today, I'm happy to share there are 4 approved drugs to slow the process and numerous drugs under development in various stages of testing that show promise on slowing and hopefully curing the disease. We are teetering on the pinnacle of so many companies and researchers finding a cure. Some of these treatments may one day be used to treat non-symptomatic patients who have one of the genetic defects, but without genetic testing, Maryland citizens who could get early proactive treatment won't, because they put it off due to concerns about being able to get life insurance. I mentioned earlier that some of our relatives have undergone genetic testing. They did this in order to be involved in a national study that follows relatives of patients with familial ALS to try and learn why some people develop it and others don't. With that said, they underwent testing knowing that it may have a negative impact, but hopefully will assist with finding a cure. For our family and others like us, passing of this legislation will take away one worry. It will provide an avenue for those who want to take genetic testing to discover if they have a gene defect, to be open to being involved in studies and future treatments to prevent this from developing this debilitating disease. As someone who has been impacted by insurance companies canceling insurance due to my wife's diagnosis, I can share that my life is already complicated enough without an insurance company that has profited from my premiums, deciding that their diagnosis should allow them to cancel our policy. Last year, one of the people against this legislation told us if it is passed, everyone with a defect will get as much insurance as they can afford. When Terry and I retired in 2018, we followed the suggestion of our financial advisors and canceled our life insurance since we did not need it to pay for our home or our burial. Not everyone is as mercenary as some people believe. I'll close by saying this: if you, your family, or your friends have never been impacted by a diagnosis of ALS, be thankful. Watching your loved ones die slowly, becoming weaker, eventually losing strength in every body muscle is heartbreaking. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our story and for your support of this important legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. And we have Lisa Peabody and Ellen Engel.
Hi, my name is Lisa Peabody and I live in Bethesda, Maryland, but I also am the advocacy manager for FORCE, which stands for Facing Our Risk of Cancer Empowered. And we represent the body of people who have a cancer inherited genetic mutation, so a family history of cancer that leads to a BRCA mutation, but there's 40 or so other mutations. So a person with a family history or a mutation could have a high risk for not only breast, ovarian, endometrial, colon, pancreatic, gastric, or prostate cancer. And we're here in great support of SB 142 that discriminates against all people with a genetic mutation or familial disease. Like was said earlier, I have 2 statements really. One was that, there was discussion about hereditary cancer and about the mutation not meaning that you actually have the disease. And for our population, once you learn that you have a mutation, you can take steps and measures to really reduce and mitigate your risk. But the insurers of these lifelong term disability care put all those people with a mutation into one bucket. So for example, let's say you have Lynch syndrome, recommended guidelines would suggest you have a colonoscopy every year. And when you're in there, you get your, all the abnormalities and the polyp zapped and you come out clean. And so your risk of cancer is really depleted at that point. And you'll, as I said, recommended guidelines every year reduce your risk. Or somebody with a BRCA mutation could elect to have a oophorectomy, have their ovaries removed, again, really reducing their risk of cancer, yet they're still in this high pool, this high risk. So it's really an unfair discrimination against these people. And I have one other statement, and that is about what we've heard before about the implications of not getting tested. My community has the ability to mitigate their risk, and they are fearful of getting tested. So if they don't get tested because they're afraid they're not going to get life insurance, if they don't get tested, it's not noted in their medical paperwork, which means their health insurance will not cover their scheduled screenings, right? Because they don't have anything to substantiate that this patient needs a colonoscopy every year. So then you're faced with this dilemma of, well, do I purchase life insurance so I can protect my family when I pass away? Or do I get tested so that I can have the necessary screenings and afford those screenings, right? Because those screenings out of pocket for colonoscopy or risk reducing surgery, they're just not accessible. So I feel like it's this ethical dilemma. So thank you. And I appreciate you giving me the extra time.
Thank you, Lisa. And Ellen, you're our last panelist.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Ellen Engel. I'm a resident of Montgomery County and a lifelong Marylander. I'm also an ovarian cancer patient and survivor, and I'm a volunteer advocate leader for the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance. I'm here today to urge you to return a favorable report for SB 142. For those who may not be familiar with ovarian cancer, it's the deadliest of the gynecologic cancers and one of the deadliest cancers overall. There is no screening mechanism for ovarian cancer, and as a result, 85% of cases are not diagnosed until it's already in the late stages. The available treatments have a low success rate, frequently resulting in repeated recurrences of the cancer, multiple cycles of treatments being necessary, and leading to an overall 5-year survival rate of only 42%. For many types and stages, mine included, the 5-year survival rate is actually less than 10%. My history with ovarian cancer started when I was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian clear cell carcinoma in June of 2015. I started chemotherapy 1 month later in July of 2015, and I was in nonstop treatment for 8 years. The first time I could say I was done was last July of 2023, and done is really not the right term. I'm on an indefinite break, but the reality I face is that the odds are higher that it will come back than that it won't. So I will probably end up in treatment again. I just don't know when at this point in time. To say that ovarian is a brutal disease is an understatement. And I'm here today because we have the ability to possibly prevent others from having to go through the same things I've experienced. I feel it's my responsibility to try to help change the current situation so no other woman has to walk this path if it can be avoided. With no way to effectively screen for ovarian cancer, the current recommendations are to try to prevent it when possible. But the steps a woman should take to do that depends on knowing their genetic risk. If you have a genetic risk, whether it's BRCA, Lynch syndrome, which Lisa mentioned, or any of the others, the recommendation is to hopefully finish having kids by the age of 30, which is hard in this day and age. Most of us don't even think about it until then. And then to have a prophylactic hysterectomy, bilateral mastectomy, and a salpingo-oophorectomy, which if you don't speak medical, that last one is removal of the ovaries and the fallopian tubes. Many of us remember when Angelina Jolie announced that she had done this, and we're very shocked by it. She's our poster child for doing exactly what she should do. Her mother passed from ovarian cancer, and she found out through testing that she had a BRCA2 mutation. She took the steps she needed to do to protect herself. We want Maryland women to be able to do the same thing. We want to empower them with the knowledge that they can do this and therefore take steps so they don't end up in 8 years of nonstop treatment or, like too many friends of mine, lost along the way because they can't get there.
Thank you for your testimony. That ends this panel. Do we have any questions for this panel of witnesses? Thank you very much. I have 3 three panelists unfavorable, Matthew Celentano, Dr. Dave Rengari, and Vincent Ryan.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Matt Celentano here today on behalf of the League of Life and Health Insurers in opposition to Senate Bill 142. We want to start by saying that ALS is truly awful and we all hope for a cure. And the stories we heard today are obviously heartbreaking. That being said, we need to relay that life insurance is fundamentally different from health insurance. We get one bite at the apple. You build a rate to you. The policy lasts decades and nobody requires a genetic test. There's no raising of rates like health insurance every year. So it's critical that we get it right the first time. This is a voluntary product and it can never, ever be canceled. The bill has a chance to upset the marketplace in a profound way. And while we sympathize with the proponents, there are very serious consequences to this policy. Life insurers want to make sure that the majority of Marylanders that buy life insurance products, many of whom buy them as their sole source of retirement, continue to do so at an affordable cost. I've asked a few experts to join me at the table today to go deeper on the implications. To my right is Vince Ryan, who's an expert from the American Council of Life Insurers on risk classification. And to his right is Dr. Dave, who is a company medical director, who's an expert on this subject. I asked for an unfavorable report and request that you look in your bill file for a letter from the Maryland Insurance Administration that clearly states that this bill is problematic, and we hope that you do not move forward this year. Thank you very much.
Matt, I just have a quick question for you. Or have any other states done this?
There is one state that has passed a bill. The proponents talked about 13 states that have moved forward. Those are in the space of the Ancestry.me direct-to-consumer type testing. There's only one state that has done this, Florida. We don't have any data on it, and there's active work to repeal that bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Vince Ryan. I am here on behalf of the American Council of Life Insurers. And to reiterate what Matt just said, we are here today in opposition, and I ask that the bill be given an unfavorable report. Again, as Matt said, the 14 bills that have been enacted have all related to the 23andMe, Ancestry.com kinds of genetic tests. And if enacted, Senate Bill 142 would be the first in the country to deny life insurers access to test information that could be predictive of risk. There's been talk about the federal law GINA, which applies to health insurers. Life, long-term care, and disability income insurers were purposefully left out of GINA when Congress debated that legislation a couple of decades ago. Unlike health insurance, we only have one opportunity to evaluate a person's risk before we issue that policy, which will remain in place for the consumer's lifetime. Once that policy is in place, we are prohibited from canceling or adjusting premiums because of changes in a person's health or subsequent test results. And this is why it's crucial to have access to a complete and accurate medical record. Couple of points on life insurance underwriting. We don't view genetic test results as exceptional and separate and apart from a routine medical file. They are weighed against the full scale of factors contained in the medical profile of each applicant. Our process is a holistic process. And in many cases, consideration of a genetic test or genetic information contained in a medical record can be a benefit. Contrary to what has been said here today, life insurance availability is competitive and accessible. Recent studies have shown that 93% of all life, long-term care, and disability insurance applicants are approved on their first application for coverage and receive preferred rates. It only makes sense that if a life insurance company is going to make a long-term promise to its consumers, it knows the applicant's true health condition. Prohibitions such as those contained in this legislation could result in higher prices, hamper competition, and scale back options for Maryland consumers. Thank you for the time, and I am available for questions.
And finally, Dr. Dave, and I won't say your last name.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Dave Ringacher. I head up underwriting for a global reinsurer. But I'm here today hopefully to offer a unique perspective because in the last 20 years, I spent almost equal time, one as a clinical neurologist advocating not only for patients with ALS, but for a variety of neurologic conditions, and the last 10 years in insurance and as an insurance medical director. And I view those goals as surprisingly similar to use advances in medicine to offer and provide protections for patients, but in a sustainable fashion. We've heard today incredibly difficult stories from the ALS community, but I feel like I'm here today to represent the opinions of other vulnerable populations that would be harmed by this bill. The first of those populations are all of those individuals with non-genetic medical conditions. Let's be clear here. This is not an ALS bill. This is not a research bill. This is a total ban on a large class of medical information, unlike we've seen in any state, inclusive of Florida. And I'm happy to go over how this goes beyond Florida. The very central tenet of life insurance is the pooling of risk. This bill violates an important principle in insurance medicine. We don't play favorites when it comes to medical conditions. I'm here today to represent individuals that we don't see here today. It's the teacher with multiple sclerosis. There. It's a police officer with a spinal cord injury. None of these individuals asked for their medical condition. But if we start playing favorites with medical conditions, it's the most vulnerable of these populations who pay that first price. Second, and this is counterintuitive, the bill as written harms the great majority of the ALS community. In this situation, if the family history is positive, but the genetic test is negative, the insurer could not use the negative genetic test in favor of that applicant. Finally, make no mistake about it, this bill seriously harms Maryland consumers. Maryland consumers would be asked to pay the protection costs for every individual with every genetic condition for every amount of insurance, 10, 20, $30 million there, and in every state in the union who would very logically come to Maryland for a policy they couldn't get elsewhere. The exclusion of life insurance from GINA was not an accident. It was purposely kept to avoid harming people.
Thank you, Doctor. Do I have any questions for this panel? Doesn't appear that we have any questions. Thank you for your testimony. That ends the hearing and ends the hearing for the day. Thank you very much, senators, for staying with us.